What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily. So with the recent launch of the new Note 20 and my recent re-review of the Note 10 Lite, a lot of you guys wanted a more direct comparison between those two phones, and that's exactly what I'm going to do in this video. If you didn't already know, the Note 10 Lite came out earlier this year as a cheaper alternative to last year's Note 10, and this new Note 20 is technically the cheapest new generation Note device for this year. If you're in the market for a phone specifically with a stylus, but maybe don't want to pay a 4-figure price tag for something like the Ultra, then these are great options. No matter which way you go, you're getting all the same S Pen stylus features you would want, which is great. And you may be able to save even more money depending on what exactly you need out of your smartphone. So in this video, I'm going to talk about all the things that are the same between these two phones, the stuff that's different, and in the end, hopefully this will help you decide if either of these phones is right for you. To start off, let's actually talk about pricing and availability, since I think that's already going to be a big deciding factor. When it launched back in January, the Note 10 Lite retailed for around $600, which was a pretty good price for a Note device at that time. But now, 8 or 9 months later, this phone has come down in price considerably, and you can pick it up from places like Amazon for $450 or less. And in my opinion, that puts this phone well within that mid-range price point. With the new Note 20, this phone obviously just came out, and its full retail price starts at $999. If you buy it direct from Samsung's website, they have some trade-in deals, and some carriers have discounts as well, so the price could vary depending on your situation. But actually, the upfront price for this new Note 20 has already come down too, on places like Amazon, where I've seen it well under $900 already, and some deals listing it for as low as $799. So depending on where you're located and how you end up buying these phones, your price may vary, but in general, no matter where you look, you'll likely be paying half as much for the Note 10 Lite versus the Note 20. So that's definitely something to consider. And if you guys are interested in doing some comparison shopping of your own, or maybe want to pick up one of these devices for yourself, I will have some links down below in the video description to where you can get both of these phones at their cheapest current prices. So be sure to check down there so you don't miss out on any good deals. Physically, at least at first glance, both of these phones look very similar, and you may not even be able to tell that they're one generation apart or that one phone costs twice as much as the other. They're both very large 6.7-inch phones, so size-wise, they're nearly identical, and while they may not be the best fit for everyone's hands, I think if you're even considering these phones, you'll obviously appreciate the huge displays. Interestingly enough, when it comes to the material, the rear housing on both of these phones is actually plastic. The Note 10 Lite has a glossy, shiny finish with that rainbow effect, while the Note 20 has a soft touch matte plastic. They both sort of mimic glass in their own way, and they don't feel cheap necessarily, but they're still plastic nonetheless. The frames are metal, which you might be able to see, so they're built very similarly, which I think is more of a negative with the Note 20 since you don't get as premium of a phone for the price. But actually, the Note 20 does have an IP68 water resistance rating and wireless charging, two features the Note 10 Lite does not offer. So somewhat cheaper build aside, you at least still get a few extra advantages going with the more expensive phone if you do value them. Taking a look around at everything else, one important thing worth noting is that the new Note 20, it's just the SIM card. You don't get expandable storage with this phone, while on the Note 10 Lite is a SIM and SD card slot. So you can throw in an SD card if you want to, which is great. The buttons on the side are the same, but down below again you'll see one more big difference. The S Pen styluses are there, of course, just on different sides along with the speaker and USB-C ports, but the Note 20 does not have a headphone jack, while the Note 10 Lite does. So physically, with the Note 10 Lite this time, you get two additional things, the SD card slot and the headphone jack, while the Note 20 misses out. Around back, both phones actually have a triple camera setup, which I'll go more in depth with shortly. And up front, both devices also have an in-display fingerprint reader. With this, I think it should come as no surprise that the newer Note 20's sensor is quite a bit faster than the Note 10 Lite. It's definitely noticeable, it's far more accurate, but both phones do offer face unlock as well, and with this method it's a little more even, but I think more often than not, once again, the Note 20 has a slight edge in speed. One other physical aspect I just want to touch on, the Note 10 Lite does have just one single speaker down below for your out loud listening experience, while the Note 20 has dual stereo sound with that additional speaker in the earpiece. And I do think this phone has a much better listening experience. Here are a couple samples so you can get an idea. In regards to the displays, you might be surprised to know that we're actually dealing with very similar setups here. Both phones, like I said, offer that massive 6.7-inch screen. They're both Super AMOLED panels, with the new Note 20 getting the new Plus distinction with its display. But besides that, they're both actually the same resolution, 2400 by 1080. Neither phone, not even the newer, pricier Note 20, offers a higher refresh rate or higher resolution or anything else. And to be totally honest, side by side, I don't really think you can tell a difference between the two at all. Both phones offer bright, colorful viewing experiences with punchy colors, deep blacks, and a great overall look. And for the Note 10 Lite, this I think is actually a selling point. Going for the cheaper, older phone doesn't mean you're sacrificing anything at all with the screen. While with the Note 20, I think its screen is more of a negative than anything else. For the price you pay for the Note 20, and because it's so much newer of a phone, you likely might expect more, like a high refresh rate or QHD resolution, but that's just not what you get here, unfortunately. So if the screen is your biggest concern, you should at least know that for the most part, it doesn't really matter which phone you end up going with. The specs and the overall viewing experience are basically identical. Furthermore, what's also pretty much identical between these two phones is the S Pen experience. Software-wise and feature-wise, everything is going to be the same between these two phones, which I actually think is great. Going with the Note 10 Lite doesn't mean you're getting like a watered-down experience at all, and once again, I just consider that a huge plus. You've got all the same S Pen capabilities, apps, shortcuts, gestures, button controls, and more. The actual S Pens themselves are also exactly the same, and like I said, that means you can use the same button shortcuts to take selfies or gesture controls to navigate some apps. The experience is going to be identical on both phones. The only difference you'll see really with the S Pen experience actually has to do with writing. The new Note 20 has improved latency, which means the tip of the pen and the line you write are closer with less lag as you draw versus the Note 10 Lite. It's a little tough to see maybe, but you might be able to pick up that there's just a bit of a gap between the pen itself and the line on the screen that's being drawn, while the Note 20 has a more seamless, more fluid, more accurate experience. It's not really a big deal, to be honest. If you're quickly jotting down notes, you may not even notice. Maybe if you like drawing or coloring, it can be more useful to have a more accurate stylus, but that's just about it. I don't think that difference warrants going with the Note 20 in the end, because the whole rest of the S Pen experience, the software, the features, all that stuff is exactly the same anyway. Realistically, the biggest difference between the Note 10 Lite and the Note 20 is going to be the internal specs powering these phones. The Note 10 Lite packs Samsung's own 2-year-old Exynos 9810 chipset, either 6 or 8 gigabytes of RAM and 128 gigabytes of UFS 2.1 storage. The new flagship Note 20, on the other hand, has either the Snapdragon 865 Plus or Exynos 990 chipset, depending on where you're located, 8 gigabytes of RAM, and either 128 or 256 gigabytes of UFS 3.0 storage. Now, the difference in RAM options I don't really think is too important, but processor processor and UFS storage, I think those are the things that people will likely be critical of. The Note 10 Lite is running a fairly dated chipset nowadays, and to be totally honest, I know not everyone is a fan of the Exynos processors just in general, but especially ones that are 2 years old now. It doesn't affect performance on this phone directly, but it's just not that flagship quality spec you might want. Now, depending on where you live, you might be subject to the Exynos 990 in the Note 20 anyway, so you won't avoid Exynos entirely, but if you have the option to get the Snapdragon 865 Plus like I have here, that's absolutely the way to go. The Note 20 just in general is not only a newer, more capable smartphone, but it feels a bit faster, a bit more snappy, especially as you start to load up more and more apps. And in the long term, it not only has a year on the Note 10 Lite as a phone, but it's almost 2 years ahead on the processor itself. That makes it a much better long-term investment, and furthermore, I do think UFS 3.0 makes a difference as well, both in speed, but also in efficiency and optimization. I don't want to criticize the Note 10 Lite too much because it's still a good phone with plenty to work with. It doesn't perform badly. Like I said, it's got the fresh new updates to keep it feeling modern. It's fully capable for everyday apps as well as things like gaming, and it's going to be fine for a couple more years at least. But the Note 20 is simply a brand new flagship device with the latest and greatest specs and will be a better long-term investment moving forward. It's more powerful and more capable now, and it'll hold up better in the long run. Does that warrant 2 times the cost? I don't necessarily think so, but if you want to really analyze the biggest, most important difference between these two phones, this is pretty much it right here. For both current and long-term performance, the Note 20 is your answer, especially if you're a power user. But if you mainly use your phone for the easy stuff, there's really nothing wrong going with just the Note 10 Lite. Interestingly enough, when it comes to battery capacity and battery life, there's something important to understand here. On paper, the Note 10 Lite has a slightly larger capacity 4500 milliamp battery versus 4300 with the Note 20. But because the Note 20 has a newer, more efficient processor and newer, more efficient storage, you can expect better battery life on the Note 20. And that's exactly what I'm experiencing. I can get a couple extra hours of use, especially if I'm gaming or pushing the phone particularly hard. I didn't find the Note 10 Lite to have bad battery life, just a little worse than the Note 20 by comparison. And like I said earlier, charging wise, the Note 20 supports wireless charging while the Note 10 Lite does not, but both phones can be paired with a 25-watt fast charger to juice them up in about an hour. Finally, when it comes to the cameras, while both of these phones do offer a triple lens setup around back, there are some big differences in specs and capabilities. Starting with the Note 10 Lite, this phone has a 12 megapixel main lens, 12 megapixel telephoto lens, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide, with a pretty solid 32 megapixel selfie camera up front. The Note 20, however, has a similar 12 megapixel main lens, but a 64 megapixel telephoto lens, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. Interestingly enough though, it has just a 10 megapixel selfie camera up front. Now, I would say 90% of the features and shooting modes across these two phones are going to be the same. One thing you will notice though is that the Note 20 has a more capable telephoto lens with better zoom potential. There's 3 times hybrid zoom and 30 times digital zoom, while I believe the Note 10 Lite just uses the telephoto lens only for portrait shots. And of course, the Note 20 can shoot up to 8K video with the rear setup, while the Note 10 Lite maxes out at 4K video. But most everything else is the same, from night mode to slow-mo and pro controls. You can utilize a high-resolution 64 megapixel mode on the Note 20 as well, which may come in handy. And I'll also say that in general, you can just expect better pictures and videos overall with the Note 20, since it's a newer phone with better processing potential and slightly better specs. Shots just tend to be more balanced, more detailed, more pleasing, and that's something you shouldn't be surprised by, given the fact that the Note 20 is a brand new flagship device. But fortunately, I still do think the Note 10 Lite takes excellent pictures that are comparable to last year's flagship Note 10. All in all, while the Note 20 is obviously a great phone and certainly a full-fledged, feature-packed flagship device, it's tough to ignore the incredible value you still get with the Note 10 Lite. For half the price, you hardly miss out on much. The older processor is really the biggest thing, but you get a headphone jack, an SD card slot, the same display, the same S Pen features, and a really good set of cameras. The Note 20, to me, just doesn't really feel like it offers enough unless you really value the Snapdragon chipset, for example, or the improved camera functionalities. Those are pretty much the only things you're paying extra for, in my opinion. And because of all that, I do think the Note 10 Lite, in this case, is just gonna be the better buy. But what do you guys think? Which phone do you prefer? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to know your thoughts, of course. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video though. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.